in large companies, in startups, and in my own consultancy firm that focused on market entry into China in tourism, hospitality, and luxury retail sectors. A couple of years ago, I published a book called China, the Future of Travel, which is still available, and that discusses in detail the Chinese outbound travel industry. And I joined Dragon Trail this year to expand our business in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and make it a much more global business to allow for destinations and clients in the tourism sector that don't have a base or presence physically in China to still benefit from marketing to the Chinese travelers through digital means. Dragon Trail is a leading agency that only works with clients in the tourism and hospitality sectors and only engages in digital marketing for the Chinese market. So we're very specific, and because of that, we have a lot of expertise and knowledge and content focused on Chinese travelers who want to visit new destinations abroad. And we work with tourism boards, with destination marketing companies, with hotel chains, cruise lines, airlines, airports, car companies, attractions, etc. So these are some of our examples of some of our clients, just a handpicked list of a few names you might recognize. And today, our webinar will last about 30 minutes with a few minutes left at the end for Q&A. And you're welcome to send your questions to us through the Q&A dialogue box in the program. We're covering B2B strategy and introduction of the market for B2B travel in China. A little bit of explanation of how the Chinese travel industry works in practice. What are some of the travel fairs that you might be interested to attend, and some tips on attending them? What are the digital solutions and the platforms that are effective for use to engage directly with the trade in China? And a little bit about Chinese negotiation and business etiquette. So just in broad strokes, what does the market look like, and what kind of need you have for B2B strategy? So we know that overall, FIT business is growing faster than group travel for outbound. However, that's not the full picture, because while group travel is growing slower than FIT, FIT is strong mainly in first and second tier cities, whereas third, fourth, etc. tier cities, smaller cities and areas in China, still predominantly send out group travel business. And out of the FIT market, we divide that into full independent and semi-independent travel, so SIT. And for semi-independent travel, their habit is to get together in small groups of maybe 4, 5, 6, up to 8 people, friends or families or colleagues, and plan their travel together. So while their planning is independent, they may be still booking certain services from travel agents, and therefore your work with those travel agents is still very important to get that business. Now, they would book fragmented travel, so a flight here, a hotel there, a sightseeing tour somewhere else. They will look at the range of both OTAs in China and traditional travel agencies. And of course, you then have the mass travel and the group travel business that comes from, still in large numbers, but in percentage terms, less than FIT, but also from second and third tier cities where these are still people that may be first time or second time travelers. So not as independent, not as confident. And on the luxury side, people that are basically can afford to travel anywhere they want and on their own time, they are looking for convenience, and they're looking for people that will just help them. So maybe instead of thinking about it as somebody who's going to a traditional travel agent and joining a tour, is basically they want bespoke, tailor-made tours that still need a knowledgeable expert travel planner or consultant. The surveys that I've done, especially on the luxury end, look at people really focused on self-planning the tour or using an assistant or an advisor to plan it for them. The source regions for outbound tourism are still very much in terms of where the money is. So the The eastern seaboard, Shanghai and the provinces around Shanghai, Zhejiang and Jiangsu. In the north, you have Beijing and Tianjin and the area around that. And then you've got the southern province of Guangdong with many cities, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and other cities that have a lot of wealth and are very developed. Then you would have some of the powerhouses, the industrial powerhouses in the northeast, and Hubei and Sichuan that are also very populous and quite heavily industrialized regions that also receive a lot of government support and funding. So that is helping them develop faster. When it comes now to travel, and I think that this is something that where China is catching up with the rest of the world, the idea of tailor-made tours really applies to more and more niche travel segments. So I just want to talk a little bit about these niche segments, and you can think about what is your business, where does it fit, what is that segment that you might want to go after, and that will help you really figure out your strategy of who to talk to in China, which fairs to go to, which areas in China to visit, and what kind of services and itineraries you really should be offering there. The luxury travelers is a very well, it's hard to get to segment. It's also very segmented in itself, and these are people that are looking for very high standards of service and also are looking for a lot of flexibility. They may change their itineraries very last minute. They may do add-ons. They may cancel. A lot depends on their business schedule, but they're also looking for very unique, exclusive experiences. We will be doing a separate webinar in the future only on the luxury travel segment. Adventure travelers is a recent and fast-growing segment that includes both millennials, younger people under 40, as well as silver travelers, so basically people over 60, retired, still in very, very good health, that are looking for more unique experiences, that have probably done a lot, already did group travel in Europe and Americas and Australia, and are looking for soft adventure. So you've got more adrenaline junkies, so people looking for experiences they can boast about in the younger group, and then silver travelers that have done pretty much everything else and are looking for something new. Millennial travelers are currently, depending on the survey you read, are up to 60% of all outbound travelers. And these are people born after the 80s, after 1980. And they have shifted away from buying things and focusing on what they can buy and own into what they can experience. So they're looking to try local culture and local food, meet with locals, learn about, for example, if they go to Italy, they might want to learn about making wine or making cheese or going truffle hunting. They may want to drive supercars as an experience. They may want to stay with a local family for a night, kind of learn about local culture. Now, for them, it's also very important to be able to share everything they experience online with their friends. Family tourism is also a very important market because parents really, they have either one or two children, and they're very focused on the well-being and the future success of their children. A family unit might include and travel one child and the parents, and then their sets of the grandparents. And therefore, catering to this market requires a more flexible and I guess multifaceted itinerary that basically includes something for everybody. And we also have MICE, so meetings, incentives, incentive tourism can get to crazy numbers. You have big companies in China that run incentives every year for their staff, for their clients, or for their suppliers. And we're talking about hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. And while they often choose destinations where it's easy to organize this kind of trip, for example, Southeast Asia, places like Taiwan, Thailand, Bali are very popular for incentives. You will also see that major cities in Europe get quite a bit of incentive travel business. So I want to spend just a few words about the Chinese travel industry as a whole. One of the things to understand that in China, as opposed to really anywhere else, the CNTA is at a ministry level department that controls both inbound and outbound tourism. So they're responsible for developing promotion for tourism to China, but they also oversee, manage, and license anybody engaged in tourism activity, including domestic, inbound, and outbound. And then underneath the federal level, every province and city has a local CNTA branch that's responsible for implementing all the policies, for taxation in tourism attraction, and for licensing outbound Chinese travel agencies. Now, they also, any national tourism organization from abroad needs to register with CNTA to be able to promote tourism to the Chinese. Now, the approved destination status is, or ADS for short, is a bilateral agreement that CNTA sign with the respective government in a bilateral exchange that basically intends to promote tourism in both directions. It was started in the 1990s. The first foreign Western countries to get the ADS were Australia and New Zealand. And really by now, most travel destinations around the world have signed ADS with China. And the idea is to really ensure that the quality of tourism remains high by maintaining a list of approved suppliers in the destination that can work on tourism and cooperate with Chinese travel agencies that have the outbound travel license. So in many cases now, because everybody has that, and because essentially you cannot, most Western countries do not maintain a particular list or issue a license to inbound suppliers. So every country, it works different in case of who can be on this ADS list. Now, in most cases, being on the ADS list, if one exists and if the local tourism board maintains that, is a good thing, because for Chinese travel agents that want to operate group tours, if they don't work with an ADS approved supplier, then if anything goes wrong, then that basically violates the terms of their license, and the bond that they put up with CNTA might be at risk. So they legally need to work with an ADS approved supplier. If you're a supplier and you're a value incoming business and you're not on that list, you need to speak to your tourism board or your tourism association and ask about that. Now, the way that outbound tourism works in China is that legally, if you are a travel agent and you want to send tours abroad, you need to already have been working on inbound travel for 2 years before you can apply for an outbound license. So because of that law, and because, practically many of the agencies that want to focus on outbound don't really want to deal with inbound, it's a very different business. So the very large companies that used to be state-owned can do both because they have different departments. But for small agencies, that's not practical. And what happens in practice is that for group travel, you have wholesalers and retailers. If the retailers are sending, for example, are not organizing their own group, but are only sending business on to the wholesaler, let's say they sell 2 or 4 seats on a group, and that goes on to the wholesaler that actually operates the group, then it's only the wholesaler that needs to have the outbound license. If you want to operate your own groups and you don't have your own outbound license, you can still do that by essentially renting a license from another agency that maybe does a lot of inbound business, and they don't really need or using that outbound license. So you can basically pay them a fee to use that license. What that really means is that if you're meeting travel agents, they might have a name XY company, but the license itself comes from CITS or CYTS or another company. And that might look strange on a business card, but it's okay. It's just the way business is done there. And it does mean you need to do some due diligence to make sure that the person you're talking to really does have the license and also has a good reputation in the industry. Now, there are thousands of agencies registered in China. Almost 3,000 are licensed to operate outbound travel. Doesn't mean all of them do outbound. Now, you have the larger companies that used to be state-owned and have been privatized, like CTS, CITS, CYTS, China Comfort, and China Merchants, and many others. You have foreign-owned or joint venture companies that basically were created from a merger of different companies together. And you have perfectly private companies that have become very large wholesalers and operators in their own right. And you also have the wholesalers that are bed banks and large operators that have been in China for a long time, that have local offices, that have a really good network where they work with many travel agents in China, like Turico, Hotelbeds, Travel, GTA. I used to work for GTA and actually established all the FIT business for them in China in the early 2000s. So when it comes to working with the trade, if you are a supplier and you are already, say, working with some of the wholesalers, the international wholesalers, but you want to also start working with more Chinese travel agencies, it's really important, depending on your budget and on the scale of your business, to focus on the geography. So maybe only around kind of Shanghai and Eastern China or Northern China, or if you focus on South China, then you can basically employ a Cantonese speaker. So understanding where you should start if you can't cover the whole market, because it's really very different. And what you don't want to do is, say, mix a group with people from South China and North China. That wouldn't really work. Now, understand that you need to basically track down what license they have, and the name of the company doesn't necessarily mean that it's part of the same big company that's on the card, but also a name of a company that you never heard of doesn't mean it's a company you shouldn't work with. For example, CTS or CITS have different brand names for different types of businesses, depending on the segment that they're targeting. So they may have a different brand for online, a different brand for luxury, and things like that. The main thing is to know who you're working with and establish a relationship with that person, making sure you're speaking to somebody who can really make the decisions. And if you're meeting an agent and they want to work with you, then again, try to get to the top, or if it's a large company, to the head of the department or the product manager or indeed the owner, because in larger companies, you have different department managers and sub-managers, etc. And it can happen where somebody may want to ask you for a bribe in order to channel business through you instead of another supplier. And if you're not going higher enough, then you might be stuck somewhere in the middle with that kind of requirement. So that's what I'm saying. Due diligence, knowing who is in that company and who you should really talk to is extremely important. And because of the need to build relationship, then going to China and meeting them, whether it's through a travel fair or through doing like a sales trip, is extremely important. And then once you've met with them, it's really good to maintain contact through WeChat, for example, because WeChat is the best and most popular social media network and kind of peer-to-peer communication network in China. And it's very easy for you to stay in touch with them through that way, especially since they can't use Facebook, they can't use Twitter, they don't use Google. So if you don't have WeChat yet, you should really download that and create a personal account for yourself as a minimum. When it comes to the online travel industry, then again, it's split into OTAs and meta searches, marketplaces where different agents put their product, like Fliggy, it's the biggest one, travel review sites that focus on content, but also allow people to plan itineraries and book, usually through affiliate agreements where they pass you on to another OTAs. And personalized travel platforms and travel apps that allow you, that use artificial intelligence, for example, to suggest itineraries for you. And of course, these are all companies that you can also work with. Working with the OTAs, really they expect now to build XML interfaces with you, especially if you're providing hotels or even the ground services. They're looking for automatic confirmation, instant bookings, as well as abilities to do cancellations and refunds automatically online. But working with some of the larger players like Ctrip, Chunar, Elon, is getting harder because they really get many requests to work with them from a range of suppliers all over the world, and they really focus on where they have demand. So if you're in a destination that is not yet receiving many Chinese, it's likely that they're not going to be too interested to work with you. But if you're in a very high demand destination where there's big competition for hotels and for tours, then they'll be more interested. If you've got a very easy way to help them connect to you through XML or through an API, again, that makes it easier. And of course, some of them would want to be paid for you to basically essentially advertise on their platform. So let's talk a little bit about fairs, travel fairs. For many suppliers, the best way to start, if you're new to the market, is to attend one of the trade shows and get a quick overview of the industry that way. But there are so many now in China, and not all of them are equal, and not all of them are relevant to the sector you're going after. So we've got a list here of a selection of them, but there are many regional ones as well in second-tier cities, which may be relevant for you if you've got a very niche product, or if you want to start smaller and maybe not spend as much money. So in Guangzhou, the main one is GITF, which is in March. And it's a good way to tap into the south of China, especially if you've got Cantonese speaking capabilities. You've got business travel fairs, including ITNCM China, which is in Shanghai in March, and CIBTM in Beijing in September. You'd have for outbound travel exclusively the COTTM, which is trade only in Beijing. I would say that it attracts a lower quality of travel agents, and mainly from the north and northeast of China. And you see there mainly, you see a lot of African or Asian destinations are exhibiting there. It can be a good introduction to the industry, but increasingly larger destinations don't go there to that one anymore. You also have the Shanghai World Travel Fair in May, also for outbound, which is a combination of B2B and B2C, and is good to deal with agents that are in Eastern China. And BITE is a consumer and domestic focused with a little bit of outbound in June. And ILTM China is a new fair. There used to be ILTM Asia for many years in Shanghai, which Reed Exhibitions, the same company that organized the WTM run, and they have moved ILTM Asia to Singapore next year with a new event called ILTM China, scheduled for October in Shanghai, which will be a luxury travel market only for Chinese buyers. So we don't know how that will go yet because it'll be the first year. They it'll be much smaller than ILTM Asia, but if you've got a very niche product that's exclusive in luxury, then that can be the right market, the right exhibition for you. And CITM, China International Travel Market, is the largest travel fair. Only about a quarter of it is outbound in terms of the space being used. And it's run by CNTA. So it's the official annual event. It's run alternate years in Shanghai and in Kunming in Western China, in Yunnan province. And the experience I have of it personally is that it's very large. It's good for networking and for meeting people, but it's also not very well organized. You only have about a day and a half of B2B access, and then it's just open to the public, and it becomes really difficult to manage. And I left ITB China to the end. That's a very new one. It basically started, this year was the first one. It's in Shanghai in May. It's basically part of the ITB group with ITB Berlin, ITB Asia in Singapore, and now in Shanghai. And we've exhibited this year. It's B2B, focused on business and leisure travel. It's quite well organized. It's not very, very big, but it's quite professional. And we've got good feedback on it. So when you're attending events, I think it's important to research and focus on the ones that will be relevant for you. Make sure that your content is all localized. Before you go, you have a website in Chinese. You can show information in Chinese either on a brochure, on a USB stick, or on a screen. Try to get appointments booked in advance. If the fair is offering that system, then that's good. If not, try to make your own appointments by getting a database and contacting agents in advance. And basically ensure that you can speak Chinese. You have a Chinese speaker with you, or get an interpreter that has some experience and understands the language and the concepts of the travel industry. And schedule time, even during the fair and before and after, for business lunches, business dinner, and socializing and building relationships with the key potential partners that you identified. It's always good to then take some time off after the event to make follow-up appointments and visit agents in their office to see, first of all, so you have more time to talk business, because at the fair, you're basically getting to know each other, introducing your products, but it's very rare that you'll actually close any business there. And secondly, you can see what their office is like, and how many staff they have, and what kind of partners they already work with. Make sure that when you're meeting people, you connect with them on WeChat and you tag them on WeChat so you can remember to follow up with them. And ideally, if you can do this, then in the coming months, organize a fam tour where you can basically bring the key partners to your destination to spend more time with them and make sure that they really understand how to sell the product. Moving on to fam tours. So if you are a big supplier, if you are a hotel chain, if you are to a tourism board and you're looking to work with the trade, then it's really important to organize these fam tours, do several times of them a year. And basically the key things to remember is that you shouldn't mix travel agents with media or with key opinion leaders, because bloggers and digital influencers are increasingly important to influence the demand side for the consumers, even if the business goes through the trade. Make sure that you invite the specific person that you know will be the decision maker. If they want to send somebody else instead, generally, unless you know that they are going to really be a decision maker and have the power to influence product decisions, it's better to just say the invitation is by name and then decide whether to pass it on to somebody else. Don't mix people from Hong Kong and mainland China. And if you can, if you're doing more than one trip, then potentially you can put people from South China, Guangdong, and Hong Kong together and give them interpreter in Cantonese, and then a different one for North China or for East China, because it's easier for them to communicate in Mandarin. Make sure that all the costs are included. Also, in any kind of domestic travel and domestic stay, transportation costs need to be covered for them, as well as visa costs. Once you have made the initial connection through the fam tour, through the trade show, through visiting, using WeChat for communication is, as I mentioned, increasing very, very important. Adding them, tagging them, you can create different tags by city, by type of business, by sector, etc., and which will then help you see, especially if you have many, many contacts, you can group them. You can create a group chat where you can basically talk to a large group together, and then you can share updates and news about your services instantly to all your contacts, but also to selected groups of people by using those tags. Now, the good thing about WeChat is that the travel agents also use WeChat directly to communicate with their customers. So if you give them a digital promotion tool, like an article or something like that, or a video, they can automatically share it with all their clients. You can also create an account, an official account. For that, you need to basically register a verified account. That does cost a little bit, but doing that means that you can then allow people to follow you, and there's no limit on that. And you'll be able to also communicate with them on a one-to-one basis as well as one-to-many. It's as a public account, it can also be discoverable through search, and it allows you to also create kind of static content through a navigation bar at the bottom of the account, which as a personal account you won't have, where you can basically share additional information, maps, itineraries, contact page, and things like that. So one of the solutions that we offer to destinations and also larger companies like airlines and cruise lines is a way to train the trade. So the China Travel Academy is a training platform that is based on WeChat and WeChat servers. That means that travel agents log in with WeChat to get destination training on the market and on the destination. So they will go through a series of Q&A after reading text and destination information, watching videos, etc. And you can incentivize them to complete the training through giving little prizes or joining a fam tour. In the case of, say, from Peru, when they do the CTA e-learning, everybody that completed the course then got a chance to win a place on the fam tour, as well as winning small prizes. The other digital product that works with the trade is a product catalog, where you can, through the WeChat account, can show a listing, a directory of, say, hotels in your destination, of retail outlets, restaurants, that the agents can filter through and can help them plan the services that they offer to the customers. Because many of the customers now are also independent or semi-independent, then they will look for fragmented products and services rather than a full itinerary, which is why a digital directory can be really useful, because they can basically take that information, copy paste it directly into a message that the customer will receive. So finally, a little bit of tips on how to work with the Chinese. I think for many of you, some of it is already well known in terms of, for example, how to exchange business cards, making sure that you actually have a business card with Chinese information on it. So your name in Chinese, and your title in Chinese, so they can basically remember how to call you and how to pronounce your name. Increasingly, people use QR codes. So having a QR code on your name card that they can link directly to your either personal WeChat account or your corporate or public WeChat account is really useful. And you should really try to focus on getting a name that is easy to pronounce in Chinese, and that can be either totally localizing your name or just writing it, the pronunciation in Chinese characters. And again, any native speaker or a translation company can help you with that. Face-to-face meetings, building relationships is increasingly important, arriving to the meeting on time, basically investing in that. So having those meals, remember that if you're dining, even if you're invited somebody to a meal and it's in China, chances are they're going to try and pay for that meal. Now, if you're really interested in their business, you need to basically fight for the right to pay for the meal. And if you're the one that invited them and set it up, then you should eventually be the one paying for the meal. And it's good to make a show of kind of discussing that between you, but eventually you can just give the card to the waiter and waitress and make sure that you paid for it. That's just part of the culture. When it comes to negotiation and you're being in meeting rooms and negotiating, have an interpreter on your side. Don't rely only on the translator from the other side. And remember that oftentimes the meetings themselves are a way to suss out and understand who they're dealing with. And sometimes the actual business will be agreed through a handshake at dinner. Don't show impatience. Don't show frustration. And we had a bit of a dropout, but I think I am back. So I will keep going. Okay, so basically, the idea of the negotiation is that you don't want to show, as I mentioned, show a lot of frustration, and you also don't want to rely on the contract so much. So when you're doing the contract, remember that you can't go back to the contract and say, oh, you signed, this is what it said in the contract, therefore you have to pay me that amount that we discussed. It's all about negotiation, and it's about building a structure that will allow for a win-win. And we can talk about more details in the Q&A about that. It's good to build long-term relationship and maybe offer some kind of override commission, especially if you're dealing with series tours on the B2B side, to ensure that they stay with you and keep working with you. And basically, remember that small gifts and gifting is a very important part of the culture, but the gifts shouldn't be extremely expensive, but they can represent something from your destination and your culture. When you're, say, attending banquets and large meals, then maybe practice your chopstick skills before, because they may not be knives and forks. And when it comes to dealing with numbers, again, part of the culture, and I'm sure you can find out a lot of information about culture, is avoiding the number 4, which in Chinese sounds like death. And when you're talking, say, people still do this, when they price an itinerary, they may finish by, they will basically put a lot of 8s in the price. So rather than, say, charging, 9,000 for something, you can charge 800, 8,880 or something, like, as an example, because that kind of feels like it basically represents good luck. So the key takeaways, as a summary: travel agents are still very influential and relevant for both the group travel and semi-independent travel. You need to basically do some due diligence in terms of the agents, making sure that they have the right license for group travel. For independent travel, that law around ADS doesn't really apply. Face-to-face meetings are still very important to build a relationship. Make good use of digital tools, whether you're an NTO or DMO, whether you're a supplier. Use WeChat, use other digital tools, use video services in China. Making sure you have a good website. It's very important. And be flexible, willing to adapt your product, and understand that, especially if you're starting a new relationship, there will be a lot of testing. There will be opportunities for you to quote on business that might be very last minute or very difficult, in a sense, because if somebody already has a supplier and they want to consider switching to you, they want to know that you are reliable and that you're flexible to work with them. We will have our next webinar in January. We're going to take a break for Christmas period for December, and we will announce the topic for that in the next couple of weeks. We also have launched a video series where we launch a short video on one topic every 2 weeks. It's called China Outbound Travel Pulse, and you can find it by going to dragontrail.com/pulse. Sienna will post a link in our chat group. And so far we've had 2 videos there, one on FIT travel and one on silver travelers, so retired travel segment. And I would now open the floor to questions from the participants. And I'm basically going to start the question and answer session. So let's see what questions we've got for us. I'm going to share the website for the video. Say dragontrail.com/pulse. Are there any questions on B2B? So we have one question from Beway Travel. You mentioned that there are niche trade shows in second and third tier cities. Can you recommend a few of these relevant to outbound travel? So I cannot tell you all of them because I don't actually know all their names necessarily. We are a digital agency, so we generally don't participate or work with the clients on that. This is information that we have to share with you, but you'll need to do your own research on that. Many of them have. I mean, especially cities like Hangzhou, like Chengdu, like Wuhan, Changsha. All of them have travel trade, and it's easy to do a search on Baidu in Chinese to find them. So you need to do that research. Another question, Portugal is not very well known, so what is the best approach for B2B? So Portugal is not necessarily that well known in China, but it is known by agents that sell Europe quite well. And the best approach probably is to look at what smaller destinations are doing that, like for example, say take Peru, which is again not a very well-known destination. It's not so easy to get to, and it's a smaller country. But the approach is to basically start with the trade, and you can, again, if you are the country and you're doing the tours and you're doing the promotion there, is start by getting the travel trade trained using, for example, the China Travel Academy platform for e-learning. When Peru did that platform training, they got within the first 4 months 900 travel agents completing the training. Because it's not well known, the travel agents really are keen to learn about it, to know how to sell it, and to show that they are experts and specialists in that. And beyond that is attending at least one travel event or organizing your own trade show, roadshow, to meet with the travel trade. And of course, to organize a fam tour, but making sure that you research to get the best clients out there, both from the traditional travel trade and the OTAs, the online travel sector. The next question is whether we need to have a website only in Chinese. It's very important to have a website in Chinese. We have talked about localization in previous webinars, but we'll also probably in the future do another one only on localization. The key is to have simplified Chinese website for mainland China, and a traditional Chinese. If you're targeting also Hong Kong and Macau, you'll need it in traditional Chinese. It's also very important that you own the domain name .cn for your destination or your company name, and that you host it on a server in China, on a local server, because otherwise you have really serious speed and kind of download speed issues. So it is very important, and it's important that when you're having the website, then the Chinese version is all localized. It's not a mix of English and Chinese, but it's all fully localized, including the buttons, any ads on it, any links, etc. So we have other questions on the chat. One is, how much prevalence does Huangbao have in Europe? Because we're trying to see it in Australia in minor ways. So platforms for kind of independent travel to book tours, etc., are starting smaller. I don't think they're that popular in China, in Europe yet, as much as in, say, in Australia, where you have a lot more FIT business, a lot more FIT visitors. But I know of one company at least that already is organizing fixed departure, hop on, hop off coach tours for independent travelers all around Europe that go to key cities. It's still small, but it's already a way for backpackers or independent travelers, maybe on a budget, to start in one city, go to another, stay a few days, and join another tour, and do it all online. And I think there's an opportunity for that, but again, the numbers in Australia for FIT are much bigger. A question for Greek tourism, the perfect way to get Chinese outbound market for Greece. Again, the examples I gave also for Portugal are relevant for Greece. When you don't have direct flight routes, then it's a little bit harder to get group business, for example, and potentially for places like Portugal, Greece, it's also good to focus more on independent travelers that can stay longer in the destination, or look at people at sub-segments that care more about culture, about history, to do it as a single destination group. Another question from Alexander regarding niche market. We broke down 5 groups and there's no shopping group as a niche market. Well, shopping is an activity that many of the markets, many of the segments also engage in. So I don't really separate. I mean, for shopping now, yes, there is a segment for shopping only, and they often have short. They might fly to South Korea or Tokyo or Singapore for the weekend just for shopping. And I know a few that also will go to Paris for 4 days just for shopping and buy for a lot of luxury goods. But it's not a segment that you can target necessarily just by focus on the shopping as a keyword, because they're fragmented all over the place and they belong to many of the other segments. But if you're targeting people through certain niche, especially through niche websites, then you could target that. However, when we talk about B2B and B2B marketing, I don't think I can discuss shopping as a group. We have another question about UK and Brexit and how that might affect B2B market. The answer for that, for Brexit, is we don't really know. There is 2 possible outcomes, and that are a little bit, very different. On one side, already we see the effect that Brexit led to a drop in the value of the pound, which means that for the Chinese, the UK is finally an affordable destination to visit compared to Europe, and that has led to a growth in business in visitors from China to the UK, and that's doing well. Also, the fact that there's a 2-year multiple entry visa for Chinese is helping. Now, potentially, if the value of the pound stops falling or goes up, and if travel, say, if you see costs to travel in the UK go up, then that might change that, right? Now, we also think that right now, for example, when you apply for a visa to Europe and the UK, even though you need 2 different visas, for travel agents, when they apply for a group visa, they can actually apply for both visas at the same time using a single form. Now, if Brexit changes that and makes it also more complicated again to apply for UK visa, that might have an impact. But you know what? I don't really know, because I don't really know, and nobody knows what kind of Brexit we're going to have, when it's going to happen, and how it will affect the UK economy. So since the government of the UK doesn't even know what Brexit is, I don't really think that we can say what the Chinese market and how will it react, unfortunately. Any more information? Right, statistics about South of Europe. I don't have it with me right now. I mean, they do exist for Portugal, other places, and I think if you contact us privately, we can talk about that. And a question about Ireland. So direct service this year between Ireland and China. I'm assuming this is direct air service. So yes, I mean, a direct airline is very, very important, but I think that what really is important when you're marketing a new destination or starting to market a new service, then to have an integrated approach where different partners work together, where you've got the airline and the destination marketing organization and the business, the trade, private trade, working really closely together to join a joint campaign that combines engaging and reaching out to the travel trade through a promotion piece, for example. So, in the case of what we do with our clients, we would make sure that the training program is updated to reflect any changes in services. And we will also ensure that we send out a direct broadcast. We have a database of 20,000 travel agencies. So we send the direct broadcast to invite them to do the training. We can also launch a specific webinar, so a live presentation, webinar to the travel trade about your new service. So let's say you will want to launch a new route. We can invite all the agents. Typically we get up, can get between 50 to 100 to 200 even, depending on how interested they are in the topic, to join through WeChat live and watch the presentation, and then interact, ask questions, and that webinar will all be recorded and can then be downloaded or sent for playback by the travel agencies. We use WeChat. We don't really use email in China anymore. We can do ADM, but really so much of the email goes straight into spam, and agents don't really use email regularly anymore. We focus on WeChat, and that's where our database lives. But if you want to send an EDM, you should probably let the agents know by WeChat that you're sending them an email, so they can actually look out for it. If you have a travel agency that has a very high standard product, luxury product, then I think probably ILTM as a luxury travel market is really relevant. But again, depending on how luxury it is, whether it's affordable luxury or exclusive luxury, ITB China might also be good. Any more questions before we wrap up? Okay, very good. So again, thank you very much for attending from Dragon Trail. If you have a very specific question about your own business service, please contact myself, roy.graf at Dragon Trail. And you can also, if you have a sales inquiry, you can send it to this email. And if you have a query about our presentations, if you want to download any further information, you can contact our communications department at this email. Communications. And I will just ask you before you leave to answer our poll. And this helps us get more feedback about the webinars and about our service, and come up with the topics that you want addressed and discussed in the future webinars. And because we're probably not going to talk to each other until next year, have a very happy Christmas and happy New Year, and a very good start to 2018. And thank you very much. Goodbye.